Okay, I think we can start now. I just would like to do some introduction on the Samancor side. The Samancor team consists of we've got Mr. Stefan Sitter on the line. He's our Chief Technology Officer for Samancor, and then also it will be Willem de Neyer. He's the Energy Manager for Samancor. And from our legal department, we have Jana Sliers. From our finance department, it's Antoni van der Loo. From the procurement department, we have Jan Grobler in Balin Choko on the line. And then also we have part of our team that's been with us on the journey since 2020. It's I think Cresco, that's well known to everyone, with Robert Vatte leading the Cresco team, and from the Allen and Overy providing us legal advisory service, it's Alexandra Felikas leading the team on that side. So this will probably be the members that will be involved in the procurement process going. I'm Skalk Besaidnot. I'm the lead on the renewables procurement part for Samancor. So the team I've mentioned is probably the team you'll be seeing as we continue down the journey. Also, just if we can have a look at the content of the presentation today, we'll have the introduction, look a little bit at the geographic footprint. We'll have a look at the key considerations, the Samancor Renewable Energy Project path. How did we get here? We'll have a typical overview on the 2024, the options for going forward, and then we'll just discuss, highlight some of the RFP documents, section A, B, C, and then we'll at the end have the strategic alignment, and then we'll be open for any Q&A questions. Also, request is that as we continue through the presentation, if there's any questions that comes up, we'd appreciate it if you can post it in the chat and type your question, and then hopefully once we get to the end, we can get all the relevant people to answer the questions that are online. If not, then we'll revert back on the questions then. So if we then basically going to continue with the introduction. Look, Samancor's main business is the mining and the smelting of chrome ore. Samancor Chrome consists of 2 mining complexes and 6 smelter complexes, and the footprint is basically from the northwest up till Steelpoort, Limpopo, and we have an installed capacity of approximately 1.2 gigawatt, where the biggest consumers in Samancor side is obviously the smelters, with the mines a little bit smaller portion. Also, Samancor's got an annual ferrochrome production of about 2.4 million tons. Based on that figure also, we are the largest integrated ferrochrome producer in the world, because over 90% of the Samancor Chrome ore are actually used in the production of ferrochrome and then exported to stainless steel producers. Now, for the ones that doesn't know, look, ferrochrome is basically the component you need to add to steel in order to make stainless steel. And that ferrochrome gives it that shiny color as well as the rust-free properties in high level of for any metal. And the total chrome ore resources at this stage is over 900 million tons, so it's well over 100 years. So we're quite sure we'll outlast, a 20 or 30-year PPA that we'll be able to negotiate several of them at the end of the procurement process. Then just also some notes, just a correction in the RFP documents that were sent out. There's a mention about Samancor Chrome Resources Pty, Samancor Chrome Pty Limited, but it should actually, the deal will be done with Samancor Chrome Limited in South Africa. So please just ignore those other 2 that were mentioned. Then also, I think some of the key legal considerations is just that look, obviously there's a lot of documents. There's going to be a lot of discussions. There's a lot of information that has to be provided by the parties, but it shall not be obstrued as an obligation on Samancor to enter into any definitive agreement with the bidders. Also, some of the key terms we'll be highlighting, it's also just key terms. I think you're all well aware that once we get to the long docs, it's probably much more detail that needs to be discussed. So today we'll just go over some of the key terms in the documents. If we just look at Samancor Chrome's footprint, look, there's several smelters from Mooinooi, Dikwena, Chrome in Brits, up till there's 2 smelter units in Woodbank, Middelburg, up till Steelport, where the other 2 is located, to Batsi Alloys, where the installed capacity varies from 209 up till 245. You'll see also our NMDs. So we've got quite a big diverse load of footprint with a large base. That will give us an opportunity to offset larger portions of energy projects. That's why if you read through the RFP, we've requested several options, solar and wind that we'll discuss, but it's partially due to that we have a big footprint and we can offset large portions of energy. If you look at our mines, they are the smaller part from 38 MVA as well. Look, we're also aware with the current changes in the market that you can reconcile several generators and several loads. That's possible, as Eskom indicated previously. And yeah, the total installed capacity for the smelting with the reference to MVA is about 1.3. And then the mining is 95 MVA. So you could see the total gigawatt hours is approximately close to 8,300 gigawatt hours. So yes, Samancor is relatively spread wide across. Hi, Rob, over to you.
Well, thank you, Skulk. So I think many of the people on the call have seen this slide a few times, but I just wanted to put this in perspective, considering the journey that Samancor's have been on before. So as many people are aware, we work for many of the large loads, and we tend to see a large portion of the market, and have been very impressed at how the market has changed over time. And I think the key focus, and I think you can just, Skulk, just flick through the colors if you can. I know I had animation there, but obviously focused on initially off-site and on-site generation. And I think this is where this RFP has been focused. So part B being the wheeled and part C being the development partner for the on-site. The Samancor is also focused on co-generation projects. It hasn't really spent too much time looking at BESS due to the scale of the operations. You saw the big numbers that Skulk mentioned earlier. But now with the movement towards multiple loads, multiple off-takers that Skulk has mentioned under the green sections, and then the movement towards the aggregator models, excess energy, the day-ahead market, we're very excited around this sort of RFP and the different types of options that we hope to receive from the various IPPs. I think the market has moved materially since the Sasol tender of 2 years ago, and having those projects achieve financial close has created some very good precedent for the market. But I think this is where we would hopefully take advantage of some of those liberalizations. As Skulk mentioned previously, we've been engaging quite extensively with Eskom around their ability to upgrade their back office systems to allow the reconciliations to be done. We've seen lots of talk around virtual wheeling and other platforms. I think that are also hopefully going to sort of move the market. But at the moment, any of the Samancor deals do not need any proof of concepts from virtual wheeling or anything like that. These deals can definitely be done using the current available wheeling regulations and back office supports that are available. And I think a point to make is that we're hoping that some of the IPPs, or at least tariff obviously being very important for wheeled deals, but the IPP's ability to take on some of the other risk allocations that maybe are not typically seen in a direct bilateral deal, I think would be very interesting. And because we have a number of loads in different locations, we potentially could allocate different IPPs to different loads or at a portfolio level. That there's a fair bit of flexibility around the load and its allocation towards the IPPs. But we believe that the market has moved materially from previous wheeling RFPs, that at least that Samancor has been involved in, and we look forward to some very interesting bids coming out of this process. Thank you, Skulk.
I think I'll give over Meneer.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm impressed with the turnout on the call. So from my side, thank you very much for the interest shown in our renewable procurement program. I'm just going to quickly go through a slide, just taking you through our energy strategy and how it was developed, effectively developed through a couple of factors identified. As Skulk and Robert mentioned, we've been on this journey for a while. So, we really needed to understand the industry for a start with regards to technology and technology selection. As Skulk has mentioned, the importance for Samancor, due to the fact that we are a energy intensive or high energy intensive user, cost is right up there as priority number one, and therefore technology selection should go as a focus on achieving a really cost effective tariff, obviously based on risk allocations, as well as the benefits we will gain from renewable projects on our carbon emissions, as well as our focus on local development, especially development in our communities, which is largely rural communities. So that's an important factor for us in this program. Ultimately giving us a long-term tariff certainty. As we all know, Eskom tariff increases over the last decades has seen north of 300%. We, as a high energy intensive user, certainly cannot be sustainable going forward. So the aim of this strategy is to ensure a long-term tariff and cost certainty for our smelters. Secondly, obviously, it's important for us to have analysed our demand, and the RFP you will see has got certain megawatts associated to on-site and off-site, and obviously that is to ensure that we, as a mining and smelting company, ensure a risk towards the commodity cycles. So, the percentage of renewables we've managed well to ensure that we address the risk of the commodity cycles as well. And then the obvious technical limitations per site and now talking to on-site projects has been assessed well. So lastly, on the procurement approach and risk allocation, we've adopted a procurement approach whereby we engage with IPPs. So our aim is not to develop and own the energy projects, hence the program we are following now. We also hope that the PPA which was supplied should be a balanced PPA based on where the current market is, as well as risk allocations. So we are interested to hear your view on that, on your submissions. So that sort of was the factors that we engaged with regards to developing the strategy. And we are here today, this program is then the culmination of those factors into a strategy. Robert also alluded to the cogen procurement program, which we are also engaging IPPs, and that is basically looking at developing waste heat and waste gas generation projects at our smelting facilities. So we're driving that hard as part of our alternative energy supply. And then lastly, but not least, Eskom engagements. Obviously, Eskom is our partner, on this journey. We are engaging with Eskom, and Eskom are aware of our plans with regards to renewable alternative energy supply. So we're keeping close to Eskom on this program as well. So that's in a summary, just a bit of history on our strategy and how we got to today. I think it's also important to note that we have signed our first PPA for solar PV already, and that program is on the way to get financial close. So we're looking forward to the second phase of the program and hope to see some good submissions. Skalk, I think that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man. Look, if we just look at the renewables 2024 options, obviously you'll see that the RFQ that's gone out, it might look a little bit complex. However, it is based on, look, through the past year, we've received from several companies outside unsolicited bids, and offering us portions or a whole project. So that's why we decided with the RFQ, there's two opportunities to exist. Obviously, it is offsite as well as on the onsite. I think the first one is mentioned that we've signed is basically an onsite one for Samancor. Obviously, it's behind the meter. There's also some risks like wheeling that we can get away of. So the procurement would basically be divided into three sections. It's between 10 to 50 megawatts, 50 to 100, and 100 to 200. I think that will be discussed as we go along. And I think that's just to accommodate a lot of what we've seen or some of the deals that Samancor has been presented for, to allow everyone. You'll see there's also PV and wind, but obviously I think the main focus is mentioned by Mr. Van Sittert is with regards to the cost. Eventually, because we're a big consumer, the tariff at the end is probably making a big difference, and then as well, depending on the risk approach we're going to take in sharing the risk. So we're also partnering for energy projects on available properties that's to Samancor's use for now for behind the meters, but obviously, as you're aware, that will take 2 to 3 years on the development part. But there's also some risk we can mitigate, especially with regards to where there's capacity on the grid or the wheeling tariffs with regards to that. Those properties are at Dikwena, in the Brits, Moeno, and the Witbank area, but that will also be given an overview. Now, if we just look at the overview of the documents, there was basically the main sections A, B, and C, that gives all the instructions on what's required and what everyone needs to do. Then we have all the annexures attached to it. In this case, we put it the project development agreement, as well as some key terms on the PPAs for on and off-site, in order to give guidance, so everyone's allowed to mark up those documents, as well to provide back to Samancor, instead of we starting once based on the PPA term sheet. The long docs will be developed, and you'll see also there is we need to understand the macroeconomic assumptions behind the deal, as well, to determine and hopefully eventually a tariff adjustment mechanism. And then also the returnable documents is all the schedules that was also sent in the document. That just allows us, instead of having a piecemeal approach, if I can use that way, to have a complete document when we start assessing the deals from Samancor side. I think if we basically, section A was just the invitation to everyone in order to allow everyone to submit bids. Under the B is basically dealing with the wheeled options that are available in the document. Section C is reference with the partnership, and that's for the development of behind the meter for Samancor. Look, we'd also appreciate you to intention to bid by the 15th of October. Hopefully it will give everyone enough time to read through the documents and ask the questions, just to allow Samancor sufficient capacity when we have to do the RFP document adjudication. I think just if we just run quickly through some of the important dates for us, it's obviously the site visit for the 4th of October from 8 till 4 in the morning. The aim is to visit the Brits Moenwe area. If there is interested, look, we do not necessarily have to enter the Samancor smelters, but it would be good if we can to give everyone just an overview of how a smelter looks and what we are doing on the smelters. That will unfortunately require you to have some form of PPA, overalls, boots, hard hat, the normal part. So if you could reply and indicate how many people would like to visit the sites as well, we can start making the necessary arrangements. And then the bid submission deadline is the 3rd of November at this stage. And I think also to note is that the bids to be valid for minimum of 90 days from submission, in order to allow us to be able to get to the preferred bidder notification of February without there's any too much changes to the pricing now. Then if we look at section B of the RFQ, there's the IPP selection and procurement. Rob, I'll give over to you again.
Great. So I think Skulk has touched on the documentation and the submissions. I think, as you know, Cresco has been involved in a number of RFP procurements, and we've tried to keep a lot of the documentation standard. So if you've responded to some before, you shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. This case, we have separated out the experience criteria and put it in part section A, not in section B, but otherwise it's pretty similar to do. And then in terms of the typical adjudication process, we're obviously trying to do as much as possible a like-for-like cost of energy calculation using consistent macroeconomic assumptions, dollar exchange rate, sort of interest rates and the like. We will use the typical NPV of savings approach that we've used previously. We don't require the bidder to give us what they think is the NPV of savings. We have a standard methodology that we'll use on our side, and we also take into account potential changes to the Megaflex tariff structure, as well as any potential special relationships with Eskom. So I wouldn't try and second guess the savings in any way. You need to be at a portfolio level to understand the full implication. We would then potentially request a best and final offer, because we are conscious that in this scenario, it's not going to be comparing quite like for like all the time. We're going to be comparing different PPA periods and different risk allocations. So we hopefully, the shortlist, this will be published based on a shortlist approach. Proof of funding is obviously very key for the scale of these projects. So we prefer something more than a flower letter. And Samancor does have existing relationships with many of the current South African banks. So those relationships already exist, and so we suggest that you engage with them as there. And then there will be a little bit of a project development agreement approach between when the project is selected as preferred bidder and to get financial close. We are aware of the permitting issues out there, servitudes to get financial close, and then obviously the grid allocation and budget quote. Samancor is aware of that process, so there will be specific engagement with the preferred IPPs, and I think there will be a few, as we mentioned, just because of the scale of the procurement and the sizing around how quickly the IPP will require to get to financial close to meet some of the targets. And then we would obviously hope to push to financial close as quickly as possible, but in reality, we think this would take at least 9 months. There's significant precedent that has been set around wheeling deals, which we think would allow us to cut some of the timelines out. But as we know, achieving financial close and getting the final permits is quite difficult, although the regulatory approvals are less of a concern, and therefore we will push ahead accordingly. And we would expect perhaps there to be 1 or 2 preferred bidders per category of the application. The reason we're looking for different PPA periods is different smelters within the group potentially, I wouldn't say have different life of mines, but have different useful lives. And if we want a portfolio approach across that to have as much as possible blend that for the benefit of the Samancor RFP process. Next slide, please. So I think, again, we've touched on the dates, but we would hopefully have preferred bidder notification early February, financial close, hopefully not aspirationally, but maybe realistically by the end of next year, with obviously construction starting as soon as possible. And I know the 2020 with a 2-year construction period, hopefully for wind, we know PV potentially would be less than that, but we are expecting realistically that with the bulk of the energy that is procured through the wheeling RFP will be available during 2026, early 2027, as part of meeting the various criteria that Samancor has set for themselves. We also believe that obviously Samancor is one of the larger Eskom connected loads that hasn't sort of signed up large wheeling procurements. Steph mentioned that 1 PPA has already been signed, but that's only a very small portion of the load. And so therefore we believe Samancor would be an interesting opportunity for many of the IPP bidders who are currently in this space. Thank you. So just to recap on the sizing, and we saw the different size of the loads. And so we're looking at sort of a 10 to 50 megawatt project, most probably proposed by an aggregator. As Schalk mentioned, Samancor's had a number of unsolicited bids over the last couple of years, and that's why we're giving everyone a chance to sort of on a like-for-like basis provide the updated offering. We would think perhaps that 50 megawatts might be 25% of the total generation, and we would expect the PPA risk sharing to be appropriate. We're also aware that large-scale aggregators have not actually achieved financial close, and the only ones really have been smaller, so we do expect a little bit of more water to run under that bridge from a PPA negotiation point of view. The next one is really purchasing the majority of a large-scale PV project, PV only and or PV on wind. Samancor is very price sensitive. Based on the recent wind projects that we've seen in the market, we would really like to see wind as a viable option. The time of use is perhaps a little bit less relevant for Samancor, which might make wind less exciting. So the wind and the PV together, we think would be an interesting combination. Unless the wind projects are very competitive, we would be surprised if the wind on a standalone basis would actually make sense, but happy to have separate engagements on that. So for this sizing, we're expecting the buyer to be the primary off-taker, perhaps some excess energy sales or perhaps smaller clients as part of that might be an option. And then the second category is, I guess, more on a sort of portfolio basis. And we definitely have seen the move towards clusters of projects, either in the same area or in similar areas. And I guess this is where we, as Samancor, might be 20 to 40% of a larger volume or portfolio of projects. We're conscious that at a PPA approach, we might have a master PPA and then some sub PPAs as part of the preferred bidder stage. But we believe that the current PPA term sheet we've given should give the IPP sufficient points to note where there could be improvements on the risk allocations or not. But as we've said, this is a bit more complicated from different offerings, but we would expect that the different offers to come at potentially different prices, but also with different risk allocations. And risk allocation is a key part of the discussion and adjudication, as well as the termination values that are requested. We know there's been some precedent in the market for bilateral deals, and we've seen some aspirational termination suggestions out there, and we'd like to see how many of those are true, as well as updated offers. Thank you. Next slide, please. So I guess this is what makes the documentation the very heavy bit, is that we're asking for not only 3 ranges, but also 3 terms. There's no obligation for the IPP to offer 15 different bids. If they would like to, they can. We would obviously like to see the most competitive bids from a price point of view, but if there are shorter term PPAs with less price implication, that would be interesting too. So if you are going to submit all 15, that would be appreciated, but it is also up to the IPP to cherry pick if it's only a 20 megawatt for 10 years, or if it's only 100 megawatt for 20 years, we'll also take on board any of those offers. We are conscious that this part of the RFP is probably a bit complicated and lots of documentation. So we will issue further clarification notes throughout this process to help people with completing a number of the forms. We have not requested the financial model this time for all of the submissions, so you don't have to submit 15 financial models if you're submitting all 15. We do require the cash flow waterfalls, however, so we can do some benchmarking, which should be easily available. But at preferred bidder stage, we would require a financial model to be used to do the final price check, as well as the tariff adjustment mechanism. So that is part of the requirement, but at this stage, a financial model can be provided. It would be appreciated. It would put your bid in better stead, but there's not a requirement at this stage for 15 financial models if you submitted under 15 applications. We're conscious there has to be some sorting first before we can actually focus on the projects that are viable and are meeting the requirements of the Samancor RFP. Next slide, please. So just to touch on, your NPV of savings calculation, as mentioned, we have the buyer's inputs, we have a long-term view. We are aware of a number of changes to the Megaflex tariff. Shirley Salvaldi and the team have recently engaged with us on some webinars where she set out a number of changes. We also know that other things will change too. We also know that over time there will be the whole idea of a balanced responsible parties and things like that. So the RFP is planning for the future, although we're obviously trying to get energy in the grid as quickly as possible. The IPP offer is also there. At the moment, the structure is really set up only for variable tariffs. But a time of use tariff, if that is where you believe would be add value, that would help. But I believe the variable tariff would work for Samancor's requirements. There's also a request, obviously, in the PPA for some guarantees around generation. That part of the market, we know there's been a bit of pushback from IPPs, but it's becoming more and more important as Eskom requires additional information from loads and generators, and that is becoming important. So please do apply yourselves to that part of the PPA markup if you believe it is completely unavailable, please, or watered down, please do so accordingly. And then we will obviously work out your example cost of wheeling using the transmission losses and things like that. But we do know that this structure will change, and we'll build that into the scenarios, and therefore the winning bid from a financial point of view probably won't be the one that works on the current status going for 20 years. It'll be the one that best meets what Samancor believes will be the future Megaflex tariff structure. Because in most cases under the PPA, the changes to the Megaflex tariff are largely for the buyer's risk, just like the other generator user system charge and generation is for the IPP's risk. Next slide, please. Schalk, I think this is back to you for a moment.
Yes, Rob. We'll have a look at section C now with regards to the IPP development partner. Willem, over to you.
Thank you, Schalk. Yeah, as mentioned previously, so we are looking for a development partner. And there's basically 4 areas that's available for this to develop behind the meter. And this is based at the Samancor Chrome, TC Smelter, Mooinooi Mine, and Ferrometal Smelter. Maybe next slide, Skalk. So the first one is at the Samancor Chrome Smelter. This is based in Brits in the northwest. 4 submerged arc furnaces, 1 slag recovery plant, and 2 PSP plants. The Quena is supplied by Eskom. I've provided the GPS coordinates of the land area that we identified, as well as that it's based on Elandsfontein 440JQ in terms of farm name, and it is approximately 128 hectares in size. This property is not owned by Samancor, but it is owned by a single third party, and we are in discussions with them. We've also ran the DFFE screening tool on all of these properties, and you can see here in the table at the bottom the high to low sensitivities being for agricultural, aquatic biodiversity, avian themes, landscape solar themes, and terrestrial biodiversity themes. Next slide, please. The second site is at TC Smelters, located in Mooinooi in the northwest as well. There we have 2 submerged arc furnaces, 1 slag recovery plant, and 1 pelletizing and sintering plant. Again, the GPS coordinates provided. The 2 blue areas that's shown in the picture to the left comprise of about approximately 75 hectares, and they are both located within the plant boundary. These properties are owned by Samancor, and again, this smelter is supplied by Eskom. And then again, you can see the sensitivities from the DFFE screening tool in the table at the bottom. Next slide, please. The third one is for Mooinooi Mine. That's part of our Western Chrome Mines complex. This is also based in Mooinooi in the northwest. Here, the suitable land area is approximately 36 hectares, again owned by Samancor, and this area is also within the mine complex. So power evacuation will be done behind the meter. Next slide, please. The fourth and last one is for Ferrometal's smelter. And there we have 6 submerged arc furnaces, 1 slag recovery plant, and 1 pelletizing and sintering plant. This property is approximately 130 hectares. It is owned by Samancor. Power evacuation will also be directly to the electrical infrastructure on the site, so behind the meter, and the site is also supplied by Eskom. So in total, if we consider all 4 the land areas combined, it's approximately 370 hectares that's potentially available for a development partner. Thank you, Skalk.
Thanks, Willem. The next one, we'll look at the adjudication criteria. Rob, over to you.
Thank you. So conscious that for section C, we're looking at a project that has not been permitted, has not been designed as yet. Samancor's done a lot of the pre-work and sort of eliminated a lot of identified if there are any fatal flaws. And I know there were a lot of other sites that were looked at previously, with these 3 now being shortlisted. So obtaining indicative tariffs or PV price modules or whatever it is not appropriate. So we've gone with a different approach here. So experience tables, as under Part A, will have a higher weighting for the adjudication in Part C. We believe the experience tables are relevant for both, but different weightings. We've also provided a template where we will look at the development premium multiple. Now, we're conscious that these projects take a while to be permitted, and if the project was cancelled for whatever reason by Samancor during the process, that there would be some cost recovery request done or a discount, depending on how interested you are in the project. So we have provided this based on some simple percentages to allow a like-for-like comparison. We use the typical permit readiness test that we do for the wheeling to come up with some average scoring, but we are conscious that at preferred bidder or preferred partner stage, the development agreement will be tailored per site with actual milestones and actions and that. So this development premium won't just be linked to a percentage, it'll be linked to actual milestones. But for the purpose of the RFP, we're linking it to a percentage as a based on how far the project theoretically is developed. We would also like an indicative development budget and a timeline using one example site. This will feed into assessment of experience and our understanding of how long these things will take. And then we would like you to mark up the development agreement on your view on risk sharing and an approach. And Alex will go through the terms of the development agreement, which we believe obviously is quite different to a normal RFP and therefore worth going through in this bidders conference, whereas the wheeling RFP I think is a lot more precedent. And then there's also a markup on the on-site PPA, which is probably less relevant at this stage, considering the PPA will only be signed post the development period. But the view on risk sharing and approach is also key. And so therefore, if there are any material no-go areas or concerns, we would request that the IPP would engage on those now. And I wouldn't say that will be affected part of the adjudication criteria, but it'll definitely be the cause of some negotiation in the development discussion if there are material differences between what's acceptable. Most of these projects are theoretically do connect behind the meter, as Willem mentioned, and should the smelter not have a 20-year useful life, the view is that these projects could become export facilities over time. So I think we need to look at these as not as stranded assets over the long term, just for the use of the relevant smelter, but they could also be turned around. And the fact that there's already existing infrastructure there from a grid perspective theoretically would make these projects pretty competitive should they need to sell to an alternative partner, should the load next door no longer be available. So slightly different approach. If you would like to provide indicative tariffs and module prices and the sorts, please do, but those won't be a key part of the adjudication criteria used for Part C specifically. Part B, I think we've touched on, and that will be your typical wheeling RFP adjudication approach. Next slide, please. Alex, do you want to touch on key pointers in the PDA, please?
Yes, thanks, Rob. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So I'm going to take you through the project development agreement for the next few minutes. And obviously why this is relevant is because the projects will be developed on Samancor's project sites or project sites procured by Samancor. So Samancor has a vested interest on the time and cost related to project development. And what this agreement seeks to do is to basically regulate that period of time from appointment of the bidder as a preferred bidder until basically the effective date of the PPA. The way that the parties will share information under the project development agreement is through a steering committee that has 4 members, and 2 will be appointed by each party, so by Samancor and the development partner. It's important to note that the purpose of the steering committee isn't meant to be that sort of project oversight that basically stifles the IPP's flexibility or responsibility in developing the project, but it's very much to share information. And to the extent that decisions have to be made on the reserved matters, which relates to any extension of the project schedule, adjustment to the project budget, the NERSA registration, or any issues relating to the actual lease agreements, that any decisions in relation to those items are made by unanimous approval of the steering committee. So on those matters, Samancor would want to say. Important, obviously, that Rob's alluded to it, that we're asking you for a project development schedule as part of the RFP. And very much this is to inform the project development schedule that will be attached to the development agreement, and that the IPP will have to report against during the term of the development agreement. We also want an indication of development costs in a project budget, and that's basically because in terms of the project development agreement, there may be instances where Samancor would be liable for those costs. If we can move to the next slide, please, Skulk. As security for the performance of the development partner's obligations, Samancor will require a performance guarantee in amount of 200,000 Rand per megawatt hour. It would obviously have to be in place for the PDA to become effective, and will be valid until 2 months after the project development agreement terminates. It would have to be issued by a financial institution that it is acceptable to Samancor. So the PDA could be terminated. The thinking is that the project development agreement would stay in place until a specified long stop date, which hopefully aligns with financial close and the completion of all development activities, but it could be terminated prematurely due to the mutual written consent of the parties, breach of either of the parties, and force majeure events as well. If we can move on. Thanks, Skulk. So if the PDA terminates due to a breach by Samancor, there are basically two concepts. So what will happen as part of the project development activities is that any of the development work will actually be transferred to the project company that will be the seller. If the termination event occurs before that transfer has taken place, Samancor will be liable for all of the reimbursable external costs reasonably incurred by the development partner from appointment as successful bidder until the termination date. And for payment of that amount, the development partner will then transfer all development work to Samancor that's related to the project. If the default occurs after the project company transfer date, then Samancor will actually take transfer of the share capital of the project company, and it will be for the same value, so the development partner's development costs. If there's a termination of the agreement due to a breach by the development partner, the methodology is the same, save that the development partner development costs that are payable to the development partner would be minus a certain amount, and we've actually asked you to propose this amount. We can move on. Thanks, Skulk. In terms of occurrence, because the long stop date has occurred, and due to no defaults of either parties, they couldn't complete the respective development activities or mutual agreement. The Samancor will pay the development partner development costs, and depending on whether the work product is in the project company or not, will then either take transfer of the work product or the shares in the project company. Samancor does have a right to terminate for convenience. This would be without cause within 60 days of written notice to the development partner. And if Samancor exercises this right, it would either take transfer of the equity or the work product for a purchase price equal to the development partner development costs, plus a portion of the development premium that is in proportion to the development activities completed on the date of termination.
And Alex, if I can just jump in here, and that's linked to the development multiple financial template that we'll be using for the financial assessment. So, and one of the key criteria for the Section 3 adjudication. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. On the next slide, thanks, Skulk. So this is just setting up that there will be force majeure provisions included in the development direct agreement. So obviously if the reason that the development partner is failing to comply with the development schedule is due to force majeure, it can claim force majeure relief, and the development partner's remedy would then be obviously an extension of any of the key milestones in the project development plan. There's also a right for the parties to terminate if the force majeure event is prolonged in nature, and that trigger has been set at 180 days for more than one. If the force majeure persists for more than 180 days, then the project development agreement can be terminated by either party by giving 30 days written notice. In this instance, Samancor shall pay the development partner development costs. However, if the termination occurs after transfer of ownership of the intellectual property to the project company, then the purchase price for the shares will be equal to the fair market value of the project company at the time. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Okay, if we just look at the strategic alignment of the RFP, look from Samancor's side, we are aware that it might look like a complicated RFQ, but I think as Rob has indicated, that look, obviously each of the respondents can decide where they want to bid into to give us the best possible deal. We're also aware that there is competing RFPs currently in the market as well, that we're basically competing against. Just with reference with the part B, look, the aim is to take advantage of any of the what's happening currently in the bilateral IPP market, as well as with the aggregator models currently being out there and being explored in the market. We're also aware that it's still a lot of exploration with regards to the aggregator model. And then obviously the offers with all the bids, we eventually probably might end up with a number of preferred bidders in different sections. But as we indicated, look, we've got installed capacity of about 1.2 gigawatts within the group, so there is quite room to move with Onsite. Also, just to mention something that Rob said, look, with reference to our smelters, Samancor will also look that it can possibly, if it's on-site, become export facilities, but also the lifetime of the smelters are within Samancor's control. Look, the smelters are a little bit different to the mines. There we can refurbish equipment, and as long as Samancor can supply ore to the smelter's lifespan will be increased. And then obviously on part C, we're looking for a development partner because there's also some risk associated to wheeling based on the wheeled RFP, and that Samancor can. So we're looking forward to hopefully a lot of bids coming in that's competitive, and based on the two facts, B and C, we're also looking for long-term partners. So it's not only on the wheeled part, but on the site as well. Is there any other questions maybe that we had? Sorry, I wasn't able to see if any questions was posted into the chat group.
So only one question so long around, will we share the presentation, Skulk?
Oh, okay. Yes, we can share the presentation. I can't see that's a problem.
Okay, and then there is a hand up from meeting guest 1. So assume that we can please ask the question.
Yes, the question we can't. I'm trying to see. Yeah, meeting guest 1.
Can I? Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, sorry, my name is Vuyo and I am trader, renewable energy trader. Now I see that the focus here on the bidders is on IPP, and the information a RFP would request from an IPP can be very different from what you would request from a aggregator or a trader. So now, which then, I mean, looking at the RFP and how it needs to, the information that's required would, I mean, automatically remove a trader there, because there's some information that we wouldn't necessarily have at this stage, because we deal with many IPPs just by how we are. So I'm not sure if
So maybe I can take that question, Scott. So
yes.
Unfortunately, as far as we are aware, there's no real large scale renewable generation, and let's leave the behind the meter for the moment because we know that's quite big, that is actually built. So in our opinion, a application, sorry, Scott, you're showing your teams, but I guess you're showing the questions. Okay, cool, thank you. So therefore, in our view, dealing with an IPP, aggregator, trader, they are largely the same, because we still need to do the same permit readiness test. We still need to understand the tariffs. If you can show us that your projects already exist or in construction, so perhaps you're selling a portion of some of the existing projects, then I agree we don't need those. But in our view, we need all the typical information, because unfortunately, in our experience, There's a lot more talk about projects being developed than there is in reality. We've reviewed over 400 projects from a permit readiness point of view, and sadly, what we're often told and what we see when we do the actual due diligence are quite far apart. So in my view, you would still have to provide that information. We're not asking for the financial model at this stage. So if your trader model is off the basis of that, but to date, we have yet to align with, and we're dealing with a number of aggregators on a number of procurements and projects. But in our view, at least as Cresco, is that we need some sort of financial model at some stage to understand the tariff adjustment mechanism, specifically for the size of the projects that we're talking here. And the fact that between bidding being November and financial close being 1 year later, there will be significant changes from a macro point of view, and unfortunately the wrong way. So in my view, a trader bilateral, unless you have existing generation on the ground, the submissions are largely required are the same to give Samancor comfort that there is real projects behind what has been mentioned. Samancor has had a number of engagement with a number of unsolicited bids, and I think that's why we've now ended up in a formal RFP, because the unsolicited bids have not ended up in the result that was expected. In many cases, because of what was presented on paper in PowerPoint wasn't as good as what ended up being when we got to a detailed due diligence phase. I hope that answers your question. And Skalk, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, please.
No, Rob, I agree with what you said.
Vuyo, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. There was another hand.
There's another question. They say, is it possible to submit for section B only or section C only, or do we have to submit for both sections to qualify? I think on that one, no, it's not necessary. You can basically choose, like I think Rob mentioned it before as well, to say, look, if you only want to do the wheeling or the partner, similar with the 5, 10 or 10, 15, 20 years, look, you can submit the most competitive bid or where you feel you'll be the most competitive in. Rob, that's
correct. Correct.
And then there was another question, will more information be shared on the first PPA that is signed, as this may implicate the size and approach?
So I mean, maybe Scott, I can answer. So the standard terms or the risk allocation under the on-site PPA that is provided for the development agreement was pretty similar to the on-site PPA that was signed to date, and the current signed PPA is utility scale size. It's not rooftop parking or anything like that. So we believe the precedent has been set for the on-site projects. We're also conscious that an on-site project does have a different risk allocation than a wheeled project. Skalk, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, Rob. Just on the first PPA, it was signed and the plant will be in Steelpoort at the Tubatsi ferrochrome smelter. It's also an on-site project behind the meter. The reason for that being is that, look, when we started, Tubatsi's got the most available property, if I can put it that way, and doing the development there was also much easier.
And if some of the bidders were on the call from last time, we'll remember that we went to Tubatsi, we saw the land, and that can also prove that Samancor has gone through what it said. So that project now, that was, I guess we looked at that in 2020, hey, Skalk, when we did that, has now got to PPA signing after the permitting was completed.
Yeah. And in the case of the Tubatsi on-site, just also to mention, we did Samancor started the project without a partner. We did the EIA, we did all mitigation measures that was required. We did apply for the NERSA application. Everything was done within a SPV in Samancor. And finally, when we signed up a partner, everything will be transferred to the particular partner. So that development was done in-house for Samancor. to show our commitment on getting the project across the line. Yeah. I think there's another question, Rob. Thank you for the presentation. Level 4 BEE is required. Thank you for the level 4 BEE is required for the period of the PPA. Does the bidder needs to have black ownership or specific BEE level to bid?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, we're conscious that, and this is where it gets pretty complicated, I guess, between if you're the smelter or the mine and which code you're under and that. But I mean, we know at bidding stage, the BEE partner might not be fully empowered in the project or funded in that. But so at this stage, it'll be an obligation to achieve those BEE levels at financial close and for the period of the PPA. We also know that there are limitations on how much renewables can actually achieve the codes of good practice. So that's why we've got level 4 in at the moment, which we believe is an achievable level.
Then also a question, would it be possible for bidders to understand or receive an auditor's opinion or Samancor's credit worthiness as an off-taker and partner? Look, at this stage, look, Samancor is also privately owned. That's why you probably don't find reports out there similar to the Anglo-Americans or the Glencores. However, at this stage, look, I think that whoever bids needs to assess, and then whatever assumptions, if I can make it that way, you need to include within your bid, and then Samancor will have a look at it, and obviously whoever the respective bidders is, Samancor will sign up, or the shortlisted, we can give them access to have a look to whatever is needed from a due diligence perspective.
Correct.
Yeah. Then also, is there preferred tenure for the PPA? We understand cost tariffs may take precedent. Tenure will obviously influence price tariffs.
So maybe there, I mean, yes, we know 20 years will give the highest tariff, but as we've mentioned, the mines and the smelters do have, I guess, theoretically a different economic life or replacement life. And that's why we are looking at different size projects for different potential loads or at a portfolio level. So there is a bit of horses for courses, and that's why we have considered different sizes. And then maybe I can answer at the same time Rebecca's question just underneath, Skulk, which is why is Samancor looking for proposals of projects or portions, because many of the aggregators who've approached Samancor have offered portions of their projects there. If you don't have a portion available, then please provide your full generation. But people have mentioned that they are able to sell that. And then obviously if you're selling only to the mine itself, the load is potentially much smaller than if you took a utility scale project in itself. So the RFP has talked to the unsolicited bids that have been received by Samancor, and therefore allow everyone to offer their proposals as much as possible on a like-for-like basis.
Just to mention what Rob said there, Rebecca, look, we did through the past year received unsolicited bids from IPPs offering 10, 20, 30 megawatts that they have available in their current portfolios from an aggregator model. That's and it was a few of them. That's why we decided to include that as part. And then there's a question on the 4 available sites. Is the property size shown actual available area, or is it just an estimate?
I think that's Willem. Doesn't he walk all those sites in his boots, eh? Scott?
Yeah.
I have, Rob. So those are very close estimates, and it's based on the boundaries of those areas. But it does not take into account things like water courses that might need to be excluded, and that will be governed by the EIA process.
Yeah, and just to let you know what Willem said, obviously once the EIA is done and completed, there might be some exclusions or not, and that will eventually influences the estimated area that will be available. I think that's why Samancor looks at reimbursing, and if we do not continue on actual development costs going forward, yeah. Then there's Sepang. Thank you for the presentation. We have seen that the RFP requires shovel-ready projects. May you please confirm what this means?
So we are conscious that when we do the permit readiness test, no project ever scores 100%. That's only achieved at financial close. But we do require the key permits to be in place. So as we've mentioned, I think in the RFP doc, it's land ownership or rights, leases or options, valid ones or enforceable ones, EIA, perhaps some of the specialist studies, if they're not material, still need to be completed. That's not a big issue. If they still need to be started, that obviously is a concern. Cost estimate letter from Eskom is required. So I think those are the key, and water use license. And as long as the IPP can show that the other permits that may be required are in progress, and that there hopefully are no fatal flaws, then that should score quite highly on our permit readiness test. But if you don't have those as a minimum, that obviously would make you non-compliant, and that's also why we do require the same level of due diligence on an aggregator proposal as well as an IPP, that we get comfort that the projects we are engaging on are real and are validated.
Yeah, just on the question with the developing of the on-sites, look, there is different sites, but you can choose which one you'd like to bid for. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that you bid for all the 4 sites.
Great.
And there's another question from Futumi. The RFP requires solar PV facilities must be based on at least 12 months of relevant solar data for the location of the proposed facility. Please advise if this condition will be waived, considering for solar PV facilities, we couldn't collect on-site data like we would for wind.
No, so the normal bankable studies required by funders for PV are acceptable using a credible resource. And at preferred bidder stage, if there are questions on the resource and that, we might require the IPP to obtain an independent opinion like you do in REAP. But as long as you can show that some work has been done, which I think linked to some of the technical requirements that have been asked for, not detailed design, that will give us comfort. So I think we're aligned. If your question is linked to the grid allocation question and issues, we don't require what Eskom asked for previously and have now changed. Hope that answers the question.
And there's another question for section C. Is there a limit to the maximum installed capacity? Look, obviously with C, it's on-site development, so the limit would be the size of the available property after the EIA is done and any exclusions. But no, there's not a limit. It will basically be the size of the land that will be the limit. I see there's no more questions. There's been
There was one question around, would we be able to share a recording, Skulk?
Oh, that one, Rob. Yeah, I'm sure it won't be a problem.
Okay.
We can share the recording now.
Yeah, we might have just upload it to some YouTube or some channel that is available to everyone now.
Oh, okay, now we can have a look at that. That shouldn't be a problem. If there's another question. Based on 1,200 megawatts needed, would Samancor essentially award up to 1,000, or is the initial amount planned for award in this RFP? I think from a strategic point of view at this stage, no, we definitely not going to go up till 1,200 megawatts. Obviously, we're aware that, look, we still need base load from Eskom as well. But yeah, we set our sights preliminary on for starters at 400 megawatts. But depending on the deals that we'll be getting, that could be reconsidered at some stage. Yeah.
I think what people need to understand is that, as we've mentioned, we believe the on-site projects, because they're in fairly reasonable irradiation areas, still to be developed, still provide long-term value. So that will be built into, I guess, the overall allocation, but it is driven by price too. Schalk, agreed.
Yeah.
But it is sizable, and hence the reason we have asked for the different buckets. 400 megawatts of RE allocation at peak.
Yes, at peak. I see there was a hand up from Katlego.
Hi, Robert and team. I just have a question regarding the CEL. One of the sites that we were considering entering into the bid had a CEL that recently expired. I know you said that having CEL is a compliance criteria, but would you be willing to accept the new application along with the expired one, but with confirmation that the solution won't change?
So I think if you could submit that through the formal channels, and then we'll have
we'll
a
think about
consideration and then come back to you. I think we can't answer that question directly on the call, but if you
Okay.
clarify it, then we'll consider that. And I know that's probably, if you could show us the new budget quote, then you'd get to the front of the queue. But yeah, submit it formally and we'll respond formally on that one, I think.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I see there's another question from Vutumi. The RFP currently defines hybrid as PV plus wind. Will Samancor not consider hybrid proposals, including BESS?
So
PV plus
yeah.
BESS? Yeah.
Yeah. So Schalk, are you happy if I answer that?
Yes, Rob.
Yeah. So recent RFPs that Cresco has been involved in has asked for an element of BESS to assist the grid from ancillary service point of view. So with not a material impact on the tariff. Unfortunately, based on extensive work that we've done, large scale BESS, as in large scale movement from the middle of the day to peak to offset the load, is probably not that price competitive for Samancor based on the size of the load. And I mentioned that time of use might be less of a concern. So I think if you believe you need to offer small BESS to help the grid support and get the grid allocation, then I think that would be valuable for your bid. But if you're looking at large scale BESS to peak shave, based on the current analysis that we have done, I think we'd be pleasantly surprised if that met our price points. Tell me, does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
To clarify, are bidders permitted to submit a wind project only?
Schalk, I think we can revert, but I would say yes, but understand that this needs to be a very well priced wind project.
Agree. Is there any more questions? See, that was the last one from Loretta. If there's no more questions, yeah, look, thanks again for everyone attending the session today. Any last words from Meneer?
No, Schalk, thank you for leading this, and for all the bidders. We're really looking forward to engaging with you on the site visit. I hope you make some time, and we're looking forward to the bids. Thank you very much from my side.
Okay. Any last words from your side, Rob?
All good, thank you.
Okay. Anything last from your side, Alex?
Nothing further. Thanks, Schalk.
Okay. Okay, thanks everyone, and we'll be waiting your response with regards to how many people would like to attend the site visit, so that we can make the necessary arrangements. You'll also see we've included in the document the renewables@samancor.cr.com, where you can send all your inquiries to, and also to respond on who will be attending, and then we'll make the necessary arrangements from Samancor. And thanks again for taking the time to attend and all the questions. We'll share the presentation as well as the recording. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you. Bye-bye.